I woke up to find my fence destroyed and a water pipe running straight through my vegetable garden. Picture this: 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. I stumble outside in yesterday's clothes to find 3 HOA crew members with bolt cutters, systematically shredding my chain link fence. Sparks flying everywhere. The acrid smell of diesel exhaust mixing with crushed tomato plants as they ram an 8-inch water main directly through the center of my prize-winning heirloom garden. The massive pipe now runs like a scar across $15,000 worth of destroyed landscaping, with Delilah Thornfield, HOA president, standing there with her clipboard and fake city permits, actually grinning as the excavator churns my 3 years of soil preparation into expensive mud. "Community water project," she announced. "Your property was in our way." Here's what she didn't know. I'm a retired Army Corps water engineer, and I was about to teach her exactly who controls the water around here. Comment your craziest HOA revenge fantasy below. Mine's about to get legendary. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this suburban water war. My name's Marcus Blackwood, 52 years old, retired Army Corps of Engineers turned independent contractor. After 23 years of managing water systems in places where one miscalculation could flood entire valleys, I figured I'd earn some peace and quiet in Colorado. My grandfather left me his 2.3-acre property in Pine Ridge Estates, a little slice of paradise outside Denver where he'd grown everything from prize-winning tomatoes to the sweetest corn you've ever tasted since 1987. The musty smell of his old greenhouse mixed with the lingering scent of dried herbs still hung in the air when I moved in last spring, right after my divorce papers went through. This wasn't just any property. My land sits strategically between Pine Ridge's 847-home subdivision and Clearwater Springs, about 2.3 miles upstream, the source of most of the community's water supply. Grandfather was brilliant. His 1987 deed includes perpetual water rights and explicitly prohibits utility easements without written owner consent. The old man understood something about protecting what matters. My 16-year-old daughter Elena visits every summer, and she'd been building those gardens since she was 8. Every July, she'd arrive with seed packets and architectural plans that would make landscape designers weep. Those destroyed plants represented 3 years of soil preparation, custom drip irrigation, and a teenager's dreams of sustainable farming paradise. Pine Ridge itself is your typical upper-middle-class suburb monthly HOA fees of $340 that keep mysteriously increasing aging water infrastructure that struggles during peak usage, and most residents are decent people just trying to maintain their slice of the American dream. Then there's Delilah Thornfield. Picture every suburban horror story you've heard, then add a pressed blazer that probably costs more than most car payments and a pearl necklace that catches sunlight like a declaration of war. 58 years old, drives a spotless white BMW X5, lives in the biggest house on the newest cul-de-sac. Her husband Rick conveniently serves as city planning commissioner. Conflicts of interest are apparently a family tradition. Delilah's ruled Pine Ridge with an iron fist for 8 years, turning community governance into her personal fiefdom. But here's what really triggered this whole mess. My agricultural tax exemption saves me $2,200 annually, and she absolutely cannot tolerate it. See, every morning while sipping her organic fair trade coffee, Delilah stares directly at my unsightly vegetable gardens from her kitchen window. The woman who's never grown anything more challenging than her sense of entitlement was about to declare war on my farming operation. The trouble started 3 weeks before the fence cutting. I received a formal notice claiming my gardens violated community aesthetic standards and demanding immediate conversion to approved residential landscaping. When I politely explained my grandfather's agricultural exemption, Delilah's response was pure venom wrapped in administrative language. "Grandfathered rights don't override modern community standards," she announced during our first face-to-face meeting. "These gardens are affecting property values in the premium section." That's when I realized this wasn't about aesthetics or community welfare. This was about forcing me to abandon my agricultural classification, which would eliminate my tax advantages and set a precedent for eliminating every other exemption in Pine Ridge. The morning of the attack, I should have recognized the warning signs. The sound of diesel engines rumbling at dawn mixed with the metallic screech of cutting tools echoed through the quiet neighborhood like an industrial symphony. When I stepped outside, The rich, dark soil that Elena and I had perfected was being churned into expensive mud by heavy machinery. "Emergency water infrastructure project," Delilah explained, waving papers that looked official but smelled like fraud. The taste of yesterday's cold coffee turned bitter in my mouth as I watched $4,000 worth of heirloom tomatoes disappear under bulldozer tracks. What she didn't know was that I'd spent decades understanding water law, infrastructure rights, and exactly where Pine Ridge's water actually came from. That knowledge was about to become her worst nightmare. Within hours of the fence destruction, Delilah went nuclear. She filed an emergency complaint with the city claiming my objections to their legally permitted infrastructure project were frivolous interference with municipal utilities. The woman moved faster than a personal injury lawyer chasing an ambulance. By Thursday morning, I had a city inspector at my door conveniently from Rick Thornfield's department. The guy barely looked at the destroyed property before declaring the work properly permitted and legally authorized. When I showed him my grandfather's deed explicitly prohibiting utility easements without consent, he just shrugged like constitutional property rights were some minor paperwork dispute. Then came the real kicker, a $2,500 citation for interfering with municipal utility projects. Apparently, asking people not to destroy your property is considered obstruction in Pine Ridge. The acrid smell of fresh citations mixed with lingering diesel exhaust from their equipment, making my morning coffee taste like pure injustice. But Delilah wasn't done. Friday brought a restraining order claiming I had threatened construction workers with physical violence. The court hearing was scheduled in 3 weeks, and suddenly I'm drowning in legal fees before the case even starts. Her strategy was crystal clear: bury me in costs until I surrender. Time for my first counterpunch. I hired Janet Rodriguez, a property rights attorney who specializes in easement law and has a reputation for making HOA boards very uncomfortable. During my Army Corps days, I'd learned that utility easements require explicit property owner consent unless acquired through legitimate eminent domain, and private HOAs can't claim eminent domain without specific state authorization. Janet confirmed what I suspected. They had zero legal authority. Janet's first discovery was beautiful. The HOA's permit application listed my property as vacant municipal land, not a mistake, but outright fraud. Even better, my grandfather's 1987 deed included a clause I'd forgotten about. Any unauthorized utility work would void the city's access to our property's historical water rights. Rights that, according to Dusty County records, included access to Clearwater Springs. We filed an emergency injunction to halt construction. The judge granted it within 48 hours. Here's where Delilah made her first catastrophic mistake. Tuesday night at 11:47 p.m., my security cameras caught pure gold. The same construction crew returned to continue work despite the court injunction, with Delilah directing operations via walkie-talkie from her BMW parked in the shadows. The infrared footage was so clear you could read her license plate. But the real shocker came when I reviewed every frame. They'd buried additional pipe sections extending 200 feet beyond their original permits. This wasn't just trespassing, it was systematic land theft through infrastructure expansion. The taste of victory mixed with the metallic tang of night air as I downloaded the footage. Violating a court injunction isn't just civil disobedience, it's criminal contempt. And judges don't appreciate having their authority ignored by suburban dictators. My daughter Elena had been quietly documenting everything for TikTok, and her videos exploded overnight. 15,000 views became 50,000. Then 80,000. Comments poured in from HOA victims across the country, and suddenly Pine Ridge's dirty secrets were trending in the Denver metro area. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Florence Hartwell knocked on my door carrying homemade cookies and a folder thick enough to choke a horse. "I've been keeping records for 15 years, she said, papers rustling like autumn leaves. "Delilah's been surveying everyone's property without permission. Look at this." She spread out hand-drawn maps showing unauthorized utility markers on dozens of properties. The HOA was systematically cataloging everyone's land for future infrastructure projects without informing actual owners. It was suburban manifest destiny with better documentation. 3 more families came forward with similar stories. The Kowalskis found survey stakes behind their pool house. The Hendersons discovered someone had been measuring their backyard shed. The Patels caught HOA contractors taking soil samples from their garden at dawn. Elena's documentation caught the attention of local housing advocates, and interview requests started pouring in. Her comment sections became support groups for HOA abuse victims, with people sharing stories that made our situation look like a minor disagreement. By week's end, we'd documented systematic harassment, filed criminal complaints for violating court orders, and gathered evidence proving Delilah's community improvements were elaborate land grabs designed to boost property values in her luxury section. The crunch of gravel under my boots during evening damage assessments mixed with the distant, mocking hum of Delilah's automatic sprinkler system. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was about to learn exactly how little control she actually had over the neighborhood's water supply. But this was just the opening move. See, there's something beautiful about having an engineering background when dealing with infrastructure bullies. You understand exactly how their systems work, where they're vulnerable, and most importantly, where their water actually comes from. And I was about to give Delilah a masterclass in water rights that would change Pine Ridge forever. Delilah's response to our injunction victory was pure desperation wrapped in municipal authority. She petitioned the city to declare my property blighted and subject to forced improvement under eminent domain. The woman was trying to weaponize city government like her personal enforcement army. The emergency city council meeting was scheduled with exactly 48 hours notice, barely legal under state law, and clearly designed to limit public attendance. Rick Thornfield recused himself from the vote, but somehow his deputy ended up chairing the hearing. The fix was in from minute one. I walked into that stuffy community center expecting a fair hearing and found a kangaroo court instead. The smell of stale coffee mixed with the metallic tang of fear as Delilah presented her professional hit job aerial photos, making my property look like a post-apocalyptic wasteland. She'd hired a photographer who specialized in agricultural character assassination, shooting everything during winter dormancy with creative angles that made fertile soil look like abandoned moonscape. This agricultural blight is affecting property values throughout the premium development section, she announced to 7 nodding council members. The city has a responsibility to protect residents' investments from one individual's stubborn refusal to maintain community standards. When my turn came, I calmly presented my grandfather's deed and Elena's beautiful slideshow showing 3 years of garden development. But Janet Rodriguez had prepared something special, a folder thick enough to stop bullets containing the real bombshell. "Your Honor," Janet said, her voice cutting through the bureaucratic fog, "we'd like to present evidence that this condemnation proceeding serves private financial interests rather than legitimate public purpose." Then came the beautiful part. Rick Thornfield's construction company had received over $200,000 from HOA improvement projects over 3 years, all without competitive bidding required by state law for municipal contracts over $10,000. During my core days, I'd seen this pattern before. Municipal condemnation requires legitimate public purpose, not private enrichment schemes disguised as community development. Elena's TikTok army was watching via live stream, 45,000 viewers, and climbing as Janet systematically destroyed their legal arguments with actual documentation. Comments flew faster than raindrops, with housing advocates across Colorado witnessing small-town corruption exposed in real time. The council vote was supposed to be rubber stamp approval. Instead, 3 members abstained, 2 voted against, and only Rick's immediate cronies supported the measure. Motion failed spectacularly, captured in high definition for posterity. But here's where Delilah made her second catastrophic mistake. As we walked toward the parking lot, I noticed her BMW idling in the shadows with someone in the passenger seat. When she cornered me between 2 trucks, her desperation had morphed into something uglier. "You have no idea what you're messing with," she hissed, clutching her purse like a weapon. "This community has ways of dealing with troublemakers who don't understand their place. Accidents happen to people who push too hard." The words hung in the night air like poison, but what made my blood run cold was the passenger in her BMW, a man I didn't recognize, wearing a baseball cap pulled low, taking photos of my truck's license plate with a professional camera. Elena had kept recording, capturing every threat in crystal clear audio, but more importantly, I'd just realized this wasn't about property rights or community standards anymore. This was about intimidation, harassment, and possibly something much worse. The taste of victory from the council meeting turned bitter as gravel crunched under our feet walking to my truck. The distant hum of Delilah's idling engine mixed with the sound of her mystery passenger's camera clicking away like a mechanical heartbeat. "Dad," Elena whispered, sliding into the passenger seat, "did you see the guy taking pictures?" I had, and it changed everything. When suburban dictators start hiring photographers to document your movements and making threats about accidents, you're not dealing with HOA overreach anymore. You're dealing with something that could get dangerous fast. The ride home was tense, with Elena's fingers flying across her phone screen editing footage that would hit 60,000 views before dawn. Every few minutes I checked the rearview mirror, but the BMW had disappeared into the night like a bad omen. Back home, reviewing Elena's footage frame by frame, I caught something that made my engineer's brain start working overtime. In the background of one shot, you could clearly see survey equipment in Delilah's BMW professional grade stuff that costs more than most people's annual salaries. She wasn't just planning to steal my property through legal manipulation. She was already surveying it for development, probably had architectural plans drawn up, maybe even pre-sold lots to investors. This whole condemnation scheme was just the legal cover for a land grab that was already in motion, which meant I needed to move faster than she expected and hit harder than she could imagine. Time to escalate this war to a level Delilah never saw coming. Delilah's desperation reached nuclear levels exactly 72 hours after her parking lot threats. At 6 a.m. on a Wednesday, I woke to the screaming sound of hydraulic cutters and found HOA crews with official-looking city permits, systematically severing my water service line with surgical precision. "Emergency rerouting for community safety," the crew chief announced, waving papers that looked legitimate enough to fool a federal judge. They were forcing my connection through their new main and installing what they called a flow management system, corporate speak for a restriction valve that strangled my water pressure from 60 psi down to a pathetic 12. 12 ps. I won't run a washing machine, much less irrigate $4,000 worth of crops. Elena couldn't get enough pressure for a shower before school, and within hours, my heirloom tomatoes started wilting like they were dying of thirst in a desert. The smell of stressed plants mixed with the metallic taste of barely flowing tap water that reminded me of camping with broken equipment. The extortion demand came next, $8,500 to restore normal service. Not a repair fee, straight-up blackmail dressed in municipal language. But here's where 23 years of water engineering became my secret weapon. During late-night research in the county courthouse basement, surrounded by the musty smell of decades-old property records, I discovered something that changed everything. My grandfather's 1987 deed included perpetual water access rights directly from original source language I'd always assumed meant the community well system. But county records revealed the stunning truth. Pine Ridge's primary water source was Clearwater Springs, 2.3 miles upstream, supplying 73% of the community's needs. The same springs my grandfather had negotiated rights to 15 years before Pine Ridge existed. Janet Rodriguez nearly spit coffee across her conference table when I showed her the documentation. "Marcus," she whispered, papers rustling like dry leaves, "your grandfather's water rights legally predate every municipal agreement in this valley. You could challenge the entire community's access if you wanted." Then came the beautiful discovery that made my engineer's heart sing. Clearwater Springs wasn't owned by the city or HOA. It belonged to 78-year-old cattle rancher Bill Morrison, who'd been trying to sell for 14 months. Asking price, $127,000. Morrison's 40-year community contract had expired 11 months ago and was limping along month to month with a 30-day termination clause for breach of original water rights agreements. But here's the mini twist that made everything perfect. While researching Morrison's property, I discovered Delilah had been secretly negotiating to buy Clearwater Springs herself. Phone records from the real estate agent revealed she'd made 3 lowball offers, trying to acquire community control through personal ownership. Her plan was to purchase the springs, then charge Pine Ridge residents premium rates for their own water supply. She was literally trying to buy the community's water source to fund her private empire. Elena's TikTok army, now approaching 70,000 followers, was documenting everything while I quietly initiated contact with Morrison through a different agent. The old rancher was fed up with Pine Ridge's bureaucracy and Delilah's aggressive negotiation tactics. "That woman keeps calling with insulting offers," Morrison grumbled during our first conversation, his voice rough with frustration. "Wants to buy my family's land for half its value, then charge folks triple for their own water. Your grandfather understood the value of honest dealing. While Delilah thought she was choking me with water restrictions, I was arranging to purchase the source that supplied her entire kingdom." The irony tasted sweeter than mountain spring water. The community backlash started when other residents experienced mysterious pressure drops during peak hours. Florence's morning shower became a trickle. The Kowalski's sprinkler system failed during record heat. 2 elderly neighbors ended up hospitalized for dehydration because their home systems couldn't maintain adequate flow. Delilah's solution? Increase monthly bills $31 for emergency infrastructure maintenance, blaming my illegal agricultural usage for the problems she'd created. She was charging her neighbors extra to fund the harassment campaign against me. The smell of dying tomato plants mixed with diesel exhaust from rental irrigation equipment, keeping Elena's dreams barely alive. Every evening, I walked the property listening to Delilah's sprinkler system humming at full pressure while her neighbors rationed water like we were living through a drought. The crunch of stressed soil under my boots reminded me that this wasn't just about property rights anymore. Delilah had weaponized an essential resource against an entire community to satisfy her personal vendetta. She was literally holding families hostage with their own water supply. Morrison agreed to sell to me rather than wait for Delilah's next insulting offer. Closing date, 30 days from contract signing. Delilah thought she was teaching me about power and community control. Instead, she was about to discover what happens when you mess with someone who actually understands water rights, infrastructure systems, and the legal doctrine of prior appropriation. The lesson was going to be painful, public, and absolutely permanent. The smoking gun arrived in my email inbox at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday, courtesy of court-ordered discovery that Janet had fought 3 weeks to obtain. What I found in those HOA financial records didn't just reveal corruption, it exposed a criminal enterprise that made small-town politics look like organized crime with better landscaping. Pine Ridge's monthly fees weren't covering actual expenses. The HOA was hemorrhaging $97,000 annually, hidden through accounting tricks that would embarrass a Vegas casino. Every emergency assessment over 3 years had funded a slush fund controlled exclusively by Delilah's faction, while residents struggled with increasing fees for deteriorating services. But the real bombshell was buried in expenditure records. Delilah had authorized $340,000 in improvements without required membership votes. The water project destroying my property, originally budgeted at $45,000, somehow ballooned to $130,000 with zero competitive bidding and invoices that reeked of fraud. The smell of fresh printer ink mixed with stale coffee as I printed evidence that read like a corruption manual. Rick Thornfield's construction company had received 78% of all contracts, with markups so egregious they violated state procurement laws. They weren't just stealing, they were doing it with mathematical precision. Then I found the personal vendetta files that made my hands shake with rage. Email chains between Delilah and Rick revealed the calculated plan behind targeting my property. My agricultural exemption saved $2,200 annually in taxes, and her internal communications showed systematic elimination of every agricultural classification in Pine Ridge through infrastructure necessity. Her handwritten meeting notes were damning. Force agricultural conversion via water control, eliminate tax exemptions, increase luxury development tax base, fund premium amenities for Section A residents. Section A, the luxury cul-de-sac where Delilah lived. But here's the revelation that changed everything. Board minutes from 18 months ago proved premeditated harassment. This wasn't reactive governance. It was a documented conspiracy to eliminate my water rights, force property conversion, and set legal precedent for seizing other agricultural properties. The metallic taste of anger mixed with the satisfaction of discovery as I realized the entire water crisis was manufactured. Delilah had intentionally reduced system capacity to create artificial scarcity, justifying rate increases that funded personal enrichment while eliminating properties that didn't generate maximum tax revenue. During my core years, I'd investigated similar schemes in developing countries where officials weaponized infrastructure for personal gain. The difference was Pine Ridge residents were unknowingly funding their own exploitation through HOA fees that averaged over $4,000 annually per household. But the final document made me laugh out loud with pure, vicious satisfaction. Financial records showed Delilah had been secretly negotiating to purchase Clearwater Springs using HOA, emergency reserves community money she'd accumulated through fraudulent assessments. Her endgame was buying the springs with residents' own funds, then charging premium rates for their water while eliminating every agricultural exemption in the valley. She was planning to steal the community's water source with their own money, then hold them hostage for basic utilities. The rustle of documents under my trembling hands mixed with the distant sound of her sprinkler system running at full pressure while neighbors rationed water. Every fraudulent contract, every violation of fiduciary duty, every criminal conspiracy was documented in black and white. But here's what made me smile in that dark office. While Delilah was playing municipal politics, I'd been quietly purchasing the one asset that rendered her entire scheme powerless. Tomorrow, I'd own Clearwater Springs outright, with water rights that predated every agreement Pine Ridge had ever signed. She thought she was teaching me about power and community control. Instead, she was about to learn what happens when you threaten an engineer who actually understands infrastructure, water law, and the beautiful simplicity of prior appropriation doctrine. The power dynamic wasn't just shifting, it was about to flip completely upside down. The war room materialized in my garage over the next 72 hours, complete with property maps, legal documents, and enough coffee-stained notebooks to stock a conspiracy theorist's basement. But this wasn't paranoia. This was precision planning backed by 23 years of military engineering experience and a growing network of allies who'd had enough of Delilah's suburban dictatorship. Florence Hartwell arrived first, carrying a banker's box that smelled like mothballs and decades of meticulous record-keeping. At 73, she'd been documenting HOA financial irregularities since Delilah's faction seized control, and her evidence read like a masterclass in municipal corruption. 15 years of meeting minutes, she said, papers rustling as she spread documents across my workbench. Every illegal vote, every procedural violation, every time they spent money without authorization. I've been waiting for someone with the backbone to use this properly. Her late husband's surveying equipment proved invaluable for documenting property boundary violations throughout Pine Ridge. Florence had discovered unauthorized markers on 23 properties, evidence that Delilah's land grab extended far beyond my agricultural exemption. Dave Kowalski showed up next, carrying technical specifications that made my engineer's heart sing. As Pine Ridge's primary plumbing contractor, he'd installed every upgrade in Delilah's improvement program and could prove systematic infrastructure degradation designed to create artificial scarcity. "Those pressure regulators she had me install," he explained, pointing to system diagrams. "They're restricting flow to save money on utility bills while she charges residents premium rates for reduced service. It's like charging people extra for watered-down beer." Elena had evolved from TikTok documentarian to serious investigative journalist, and her 70,000-strong following included housing rights advocates, municipal corruption experts, and a growing network of HOA abuse victims from across Colorado. Her daily videos had caught the attention of Colorado Public Radio and the Denver Post's investigative team. Janet Rodriguez provided the legal framework that transformed our evidence into ammunition. During strategy sessions that lasted until dawn, she explained how water rights purchases could challenge municipal authority, while civil rights violations opened federal jurisdiction for prosecution. "Your grandfather's prior appropriation rights are legally bulletproof," she confirmed, spreading Colorado water law statutes across my kitchen table. "Purchase Clearwater Springs, and you control Pine Ridge's primary water source with legal authority that predates every municipal agreement they've signed." The financial planning required sacrificing my retirement security and Elena's college fund, but the numbers worked. Clearwater Springs, $127,000. Legal fees for comprehensive federal civil rights charges, $18,000. The look on Delilah's face when she realized I owned her water supply, absolutely priceless. Elena insisted on postponing college to document the case completion, arguing that real-world experience in exposing municipal corruption would serve her journalism career better than classroom theory. Her scholarship applications had already attracted attention from investigative journalism programs impressed by her ground-level documentation of HOA abuse. "This is my education in fighting systematic injustice," she declared, editing footage by lamplight that would eventually become a documentary purchased by streaming platforms for $89,000, exactly enough to restore her college fund. Dr. Sarah Henry from University of Colorado's Law School provided pro bono expertise on water rights transfers, confirming that environmental assessments and state approvals would take 45 days minimum. Her academic connections opened doors to expert witnesses willing to testify about municipal corruption and infrastructure manipulation. The comprehensive strategy crystallized over late-night sessions fueled by gas station coffee and righteous anger. Phase 1. Purchase Clearwater Springs through Agricultural LLC to avoid detection while gathering final evidence of financial fraud and civil rights violations. Phase 2. Complete environmental due diligence and water rights transfers during 60-day closing period while coordinating media coverage and federal civil rights complaints. Phase 3. Offer reasonable settlement at the annual HOA meeting board resignation and financial restitution in exchange for continued water service. Phase 4. If refused, exercise legal authority to terminate community water supply within 30 days, forcing complete governance restructure. During my core years, I'd learned that successful infrastructure operations require detailed logistics, reliable intelligence, and overwhelming force applied at decisive moments. This wasn't different, just smaller scale with better documentation and more satisfying personal stakes. The smell of aged paper mixed with fresh printer ink as we assembled evidence files that would eventually total over 1,200 pages. Every fraudulent contract, every procedural violation, every instance of financial mismanagement was cataloged with military precision. Morrison agreed to expedited closing after learning about Delilah's attempted manipulation of his property sale. The old rancher appreciated straightforward dealing and wanted his family's land in honest hands, rather than controlled by someone who'd tried to lowball him repeatedly. Timeline coordination was critical. Springs purchase completed by September 12th, annual budget meeting September 18th. Elena's return to school September 22nd, with college applications showcasing real-world journalism experience that would distinguish her from every other applicant in Colorado. The taste of victory mixed with exhaustion as we finalized preparations that would change Pine Ridge forever. Delilah thought she was playing small-town politics, while I was planning military precision infrastructure warfare backed by superior legal positioning and overwhelming documentation. She was about to discover the difference between suburban bullying and actual strategic planning. Delilah's desperation hit criminal levels the moment she realized I wasn't backing down. Her new strategy wasn't just harassment, it was systematic character assassination designed to destroy my credibility before I could expose her corruption. The woman had clearly watched too many political thrillers and thought she could gaslight an entire community into believing I was the problem. It started with anonymous flyers appearing on windshields throughout Pine Ridge at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Professional printing, glossy paper, complete with my military photo and headlines screaming, "Dangerous veteran threatens community safety." The flyers claimed I'd been dishonorably discharged for violent episodes and was using PTSD as an excuse for threatening behavior toward women. Every word was a lie, but lies printed on expensive paper look official to people who don't know better. Elena discovered the flyers while walking to school, and her live-streamed reaction to the character assassination attempt went viral instantly. 89,000 viewers watched my teenage daughter systematically debunk each claim using public military records that showed my honorable discharge and commendations for exemplary service. But Delilah wasn't finished. Fake social media accounts started flooding neighborhood Facebook groups with rumors about my threatening confrontations and unstable behavior. Anonymous posts claimed I'd made verbal threats against board members, despite zero evidence and multiple witnesses contradicting every allegation. The smell of desperation mixed with expensive perfume when Delilah organized a neighborhood safety meeting at her house, complete with professional security consultation and refreshments that probably cost more than most families' grocery budgets. 17 residents attended, mostly her immediate neighbors who'd been fed a steady diet of manufactured fear about the dangerous veteran next door. Police started receiving daily concerned citizen calls about my suspicious activities, which included the apparently threatening behavior of watering my garden and checking my mailbox. Officers who responded found a middle-aged man doing yard work, but the calls kept coming anyway. While Delilah was busy playing suburban McCarthy, I was quietly completing the most important real estate transaction in Pine Ridge's history. Environmental assessments on Clearwater Springs came back clean, water rights transfers were approved by the Colorado State Water Board, and my agricultural LLC officially took ownership at 2:47 p.m. on September 12th. I now legally owned the source that supplied 78% of Pine Ridge's water. But here's where things got interesting. During the final week before closing, my security cameras caught something that changed the entire game. At 11:23 p.m. on September 9th, a black SUV with tinted windows parked outside my property for 47 minutes. The occupants used professional surveillance equipment to photograph my house, my truck, and Elena's car. The license plate traced back to a private investigation firm in Denver, the kind that specializes in corporate espionage and reputation management for wealthy clients. Someone was paying serious money to build a case against me, probably hoping to find something that would discredit my legal challenges. Elena's TikTok documentation of the surveillance caught the attention of civil rights advocates who recognized the pattern. When wealthy defendants can't win legally, they often resort to intimidation campaigns designed to exhaust their opponent's resources and resolve. The fact that Delilah had escalated to hiring private investigators suggested she knew her municipal corruption was about to be exposed. The community backlash against her character assassination campaign was swift and brutal. Florence organized counter-meetings where residents compared their own harassment stories, and patterns emerged that made Delilah's targeting look systematic rather than reactive. 26 families had received spurious violations in the past 18 months, almost exclusively targeting households that had questioned board decisions. Dave Kowalski provided technical documentation proving the surveillance equipment in that black SUV was worth more than most people's annual salaries. Professional-grade telephoto lenses, infrared cameras, electronic monitoring devices. This wasn't amateur neighborhood watching. This was corporate-level intelligence gathering. But Delilah's most catastrophic mistake came during what she thought was a private conversation with her closest ally on the board. Elena's strategically placed recording device in the community center captured Delilah admitting the entire harassment campaign was designed to neutralize the Marcus problem before he ruins everything we've built. "He's too smart and too stubborn," she said, her voice carrying clearly through high-quality audio. "We need him discredited, isolated, or gone before the annual meeting, whatever it takes." The taste of anticipation mixed with the metallic satisfaction of having documented evidence of criminal conspiracy. Systematic harassment based on military service status violates federal civil rights laws, and hiring private investigators to build false cases against community members crosses the line from civil disputes into criminal territory. 3 days before the annual meeting, Janet filed federal civil rights complaints alleging discrimination, intimidation, and conspiracy to violate constitutional protections. The FBI's white-collar crime division opened a preliminary investigation based on the financial fraud evidence, and suddenly Delilah was facing federal scrutiny instead of small-town politics. The crunch of gravel under my boots during evening property walks mixed with the distant hum of professional surveillance equipment that I now knew was watching my every move. But I wasn't worried anymore. I was looking forward to September 18th with the kind of anticipation that comes from holding all the cards in a game your opponent doesn't even know you're playing. Delilah's final gambit was pure criminal desperation wrapped in suburban entitlement. 3 days before the annual meeting, she requested a private conversation at the neutral territory of Starbucks on Main Street, probably the first honest thing she'd done in months. What happened next would have made mob bosses proud and federal prosecutors salivate. "Let's be reasonable adults about this situation," she began, sliding into the booth across from me with her designer purse clutched like a weapon. The smell of overpriced coffee mixed with her anxiety as she launched into what could only be described as a bribery attempt disguised as community negotiation. "The board is prepared to offer you $75,000 cash for voluntary cooperation," she said, pulling out a manila envelope thick enough to choke a horse. "Consider it fair market compensation for agricultural conversion and infrastructure cooperation costs." The beautiful part was that Janet had coached me to record everything legally, and my phone app was capturing every incriminating word in crystal clear audio. Delilah was literally offering me cash to abandon my property rights and agricultural exemptions textbook municipal corruption that would make federal prosecutors weep with joy. When I politely declined her generous offer to buy my constitutional rights, her mask of suburban civility slipped completely. The threats that followed were so brazen they belonged in an organized crime documentary rather than a coffee shop conversation. "Veterans with PTSD often lose custody battles," she said, stirring her latte with mechanical precision. "Child Services takes anonymous reports very seriously, especially when there's documented evidence of unstable behavior and unsafe living conditions." The metallic taste of rage mixed with the bitter satisfaction of watching someone destroy themselves with their own words. She was threatening to weaponize child protective services against Elena, crossing lines that even corrupt politicians usually avoid. But her nuclear option was still coming. Military records can be reinterpreted, she continued, leaning forward like she was sharing state secrets. Honorable discharges sometimes hide disciplinary issues that affect civilian employment prospects. It would be unfortunate if local contractors started hearing rumors about your reliability. The woman was threatening to destroy my consulting business through character assassination, using fabricated military service allegations to eliminate my income sources. Every word was being recorded for federal investigators who specialized in prosecuting exactly this type of intimidation campaign. While Delilah was busy making threats that would earn her federal prison time, I was savoring the sweetest secret in Colorado water law. I'd owned Clearwater Springs for 6 days, making me the legal controller of Pine Ridge's primary water source with authority that predated every municipal agreement in the valley. Her smear campaign had intensified beyond character assassination into professional sabotage. Anonymous calls to potential clients warned them about hiring unstable veterans with anger management issues. Fake online reviews appeared claiming my engineering work was substandard and potentially dangerous. Someone had even contacted Elena's school claiming concerns about her unsafe home environment. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Elena's TikTok followers had organized a digital defense campaign, systematically documenting and debunking every false claim while flooding positive reviews to counter the manufactured negativity. Her 90,000-strong army included veterans advocacy groups who recognized the discriminatory patterns and legal experts who understood the federal implications. Florence had quietly organized neighborhood support that revealed the true scope of community sentiment. Her informal poll showed 87% of residents wanted complete board replacement, with many sharing their own harassment stories that painted Delilah's actions as systematic abuse rather than isolated incidents. But the real community groundswell came when other residents started experiencing direct retaliation for supporting me. The Hendersons received violation notices for fence height that had been approved 3 years earlier. The Patels got citations for garden decorations that were identical to ones in Delilah's own yard. The Kowalskis faced emergency assessment fees that violated state notification requirements. The pattern was clear. Delilah was punishing anyone who questioned her authority, using HOA powers like a personal weapon against community members who dared to resist her vision of suburban control. Dave's technical analysis revealed the beautiful irony of our situation. While Delilah was throttling community water pressure to fund her harassment campaigns, I now controlled the source that supplied her entire kingdom. Her artificial scarcity was about to become very real, except this time she wouldn't be the one controlling the valve. The smell of fresh legal documents mixed with Elena's excitement as Janet prepared comprehensive federal civil rights complaints that would make Delilah's municipal corruption a national case study. Recording someone threatening child custody manipulation and career sabotage based on military service status wasn't just evidence, it was a federal prosecutor's dream come true. 3 evenings before the annual meeting, I walked my property listening to the distant hum of Delilah's sprinkler system running at full pressure while her neighbors dealt with restrictions she'd implemented. The crunch of gravel under my boots mixed with the sound of Elena editing footage that would document the complete collapse of suburban tyranny. Tomorrow I would attend that annual meeting as an ordinary resident with extraordinary leverage. Delilah thought she was playing hardball politics while I was holding the keys to her entire water supply. The lesson she was about to learn would echo through Pine Ridge for generations. The Pine Ridge Community Center had never seen anything like September 18th's annual meeting. What normally attracted 25 board residents became a standing room-only spectacle with 412 people crammed into a space designed for half that number. The smell of nervous energy mixed with cheap institutional coffee as KDEN7's news crew positioned cameras for live broadcast coverage. Colorado Public Radio's investigative reporter sat in the front row with a photographer, documenting what would become a landmark case study in municipal corruption. In the back corner, a Colorado Attorney General investigator observed quietly, taking notes that would soon become federal indictments. Delilah entered like she owned the place, which, in her mind, she probably did. Pressed business suit, pearl necklace catching the fluorescent lights, carrying a leather portfolio thick enough to stop bullets. She'd prepared a 52-minute PowerPoint presentation on successful infrastructure modernization and community growth initiatives. The audacity was breathtaking. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, clicking through slides showing property value increases and infrastructure improvements. I'm pleased to report the successful resolution of our water rights dispute with the problem resident who refused to cooperate with community development. The taste of anticipation mixed with coffee as I sat quietly in the middle section, watching her dig her own grave with PowerPoint efficiency. Elena live-streamed to 93,000 TikTok followers while Janet documented every lie for federal prosecutors. Through persistent negotiation and legal pressure, Delilah continued, we've achieved voluntary cooperation that allows our infrastructure projects to proceed without further interference from agricultural exemption claims. That's when Florence stood up, her voice cutting through the municipal propaganda like a sword through silk. Mrs. Thornfield, could you explain why my water bill increased $43 while my water pressure decreased by half? The room erupted in murmurs as other residents shared similar experiences. Dave presented technical documentation proving deliberate system degradation, while Elena's live stream comments exploded with viewers recognizing the corruption patterns from their own communities. Multiple residents stood to share harassment stories that painted an undeniable picture of systematic abuse. The Hendersons described retroactive violation notices, the Patels documented discriminatory enforcement, the Kowalskis revealed illegal assessment procedures that violated state notification laws. "Order!" Delilah shouted, banging her gavel like she was conducting an auction rather than a community meeting. These disruptions are exactly why we need enhanced enforcement procedures and increased fees to maintain community standards. That's when she made her fatal mistake. I'm proud to announce that the board has secured funding to purchase Clearwater Springs, ensuring community control over our water supply while implementing usage fees that reflect true infrastructure costs. The silence that followed was deafening. 400 people holding their breath while I stood up, walked calmly to the podium, and placed a single manila folder where everyone could see it. "Mrs. Thornfield," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the packed room, "I'd like to address your comments about Clearwater Springs ownership." I opened the folder and displayed the deed for the news cameras to capture. As of September 12th, I own Clearwater Springs and all associated water rights that supply 78% of Pine Ridge's water. The audible gasp from 400 residents mixed with the clicking of camera shutters as Elena's livestream hit 127,000 viewers. Delilah's face drained of color so fast, it looked like someone had pulled a plug. "Your community water contract expired 11 months ago," I continued, pulling out the termination notice that Janet had prepared. "This 30-day notice is effective immediately unless there are significant changes to community governance." "You can't do this!" Delilah screamed, her suburban composure completely shattered. "You can't hold families hostage with their own water supply." The irony was beautiful. The woman who'd spent months manipulating water access to harass residents was now accusing me of the exact tactics she'd pioneered. Janet Rodriguez stood and calmly explained Colorado water law to the stunned audience, detailing how prior appropriation rights worked and why my grandfather's 1987 water rights legally superseded every municipal agreement Pine Ridge had signed. "This is terrorism," Delilah shrieked, pointing at me like I was personally responsible for every problem in her suburban kingdom. "He's a vindictive veteran trying to destroy our community." The room erupted as Elena's army responded to her military service discrimination in real time, with veterans advocates flooding the livestream comments while local residents shouted down her desperate attacks. I raised my hand for silence and delivered the line that would echo through Pine Ridge forever. "Mrs. Thornfield, I'm offering the same cooperation you gave me, conditional on your immediate resignation and full financial restitution for 3 years of systematic fraud." The community vote for complete board removal passed 403 to 9, only Delilah's immediate family voted against. The Colorado Attorney General investigator stepped forward with criminal subpoenas while FBI white-collar crime agents entered through the back doors. Elena's livestream captured Delilah's final meltdown as she stormed out shouting threats that would soon become additional federal charges. The taste of justice mixed with community celebration as Pine Ridge finally broke free from suburban tyranny. The transformation of Pine Ridge happened faster than anyone expected. Within 14 days of Delilah's spectacular public meltdown, a new board was elected with Florence as interim president. Emergency financial audits revealed the full scope of corruption, and HOA fees dropped to $195 monthly with complete transparency requirements that would make government accountants weep with joy. The criminal consequences came swift and merciless. Delilah pled guilty to embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy charges, receiving 3 years federal prison plus $427,000 in restitution payments. Rick Thornfield lost his city position, his construction company lost all municipal contracts, and they were forced to sell their luxury mansion to pay legal fees and victim compensation. But the real victory was watching Pine Ridge heal from years of systematic abuse. I signed a 15-year water contract at fair market rates with community oversight that prevented future manipulation, then converted 1.2 acres into educational garden space where families from throughout the Denver metro come for weekly organic farming workshops. The rich smell of composted soil and blooming vegetables replaced the acrid diesel exhaust of Delilah's destruction crews, a transformation that still makes me smile every morning. Elena's documentary Suburban Water Wars won the Colorado Student Film Competition and was purchased by a streaming platform for $89,000, exactly enough to restore her college fund and launch scholarship programs for other students documenting community corruption. She received full scholarship offers from 3 journalism programs impressed by her real-world investigation skills. The Clearwater Springs Conservation Initiative became a partnership with Colorado State University's Agricultural Extension Program, transforming the property into a demonstration site for sustainable water management. Our annual Water Rights Education Workshop attracts over 400 homeowners statewide who want to understand their legal protections against HOA overreach and municipal manipulation. Florence established the HOA Accountability Network, connecting 47 Colorado communities dealing with similar corruption, providing resources and legal strategies that have successfully challenged board abuse in 12 different municipalities. Property values throughout Pine Ridge increased 18% due to improved governance and unique community amenities that attract families seeking authentic neighborhood cooperation. The taste of fresh tomatoes from community gardens, mixed with the satisfaction of watching children plant seeds, where Delilah's crews once destroyed Elena's dreams. Our first annual Pine Ridge Harvest Festival attracted 1,200 people from surrounding communities, featuring local musicians, food trucks, and educational booths promoting water conservation and community self-governance. My consulting business, Blackwood Agricultural Engineering, now specializes in helping suburban communities implement sustainable farming while navigating HOA regulations. Elena's journalism career launched with Colorado Public Radio internships and investigative assignments exposing similar corruption in 3 other Colorado towns. The personal healing surprised me most. What started as a property rights battle became community building that strengthened relationships throughout Pine Ridge. Janet Rodriguez and I developed a partnership that evolved from professional to personal, showing Elena that fighting injustice can lead to unexpected happiness and genuine human connection. Colorado's legislature passed the HOA Transparency Act, inspired by our case, requiring financial audits, competitive bidding, and criminal penalties for board members violating fiduciary duties. 6 other states have adopted similar laws combating municipal corruption. Elena's scholarship fund, Future Advocacy Journalists Grant, supports students documenting community corruption and housing rights violations across the American West. The sound of her typing late at night, investigating new cases and helping other families fight back, reminds me that justice creates its own momentum. Standing in our thriving community garden surrounded by families from 5 different neighborhoods, listening to children's laughter echo where chainsaws once screamed, I realize the best revenge isn't just getting even, it's building something infinitely better than what they tried to destroy. The crunch of fresh snow under boots during winter garden planning sessions, the taste of spring water flowing freely from Clearwater Springs, the smell of success mixed with organic fertilizer. These sensory memories replace the bitter taste of corruption and diesel exhaust that once poisoned our community. If you're dealing with HOA corruption, property rights violations, or municipal abuse in your community, share your story in the comments below. I read every message and respond when I can help. Your situation might be the next story that needs national attention. And if accountability journalism and community activism interest you, hit that subscribe button for HOA stories and ring the notification bell. Elena and I are investigating municipal corruption in 4 other Colorado communities, including a case involving a $2 million embezzlement scheme and a mayor's resignation that makes Delilah look like amateur hour. Remember, they count on you staying quiet. Don't give them that satisfaction.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.